Hey guys, so as you know, I've been wanting to do a lot more book content and reading content. I'm just not sure what the best avenue is to do that. Like, I don't know what kind of videos to do other than just like recaps, and I don't really read enough to do monthly recaps, so we're just gonna do like quarterly ones, I guess, or every 3 months or so. I'll talk about all the books that I've read in the past 3 months. I'm on track to do 35. That's my overall goal for this year. I think last year I did 25. I don't remember. I will link my last overview of every book that I read last year, or every horror book, thriller, everything like that. I will link it up here. I read some of my favorite books of all time last year, so definitely check out that video. You probably see them all the time chilling over here as well. I also have a DNF book in this, or did not finish book in this, that I'm going to talk about. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know probably what the book is, so it won't be a surprise, but we'll save that for last. I will have timestamps linked down below for all the books that I cover, so you can jump around in this video if you want. And at the end of the video, I'll have you vote on what my next book should be. So before we get into all the books that I read so far this year, I have a very appropriate sponsor for this video, and that is Audible. Audible is, of course, the best resource and my favorite resource for audiobooks, not just for horror, but in any genre. They have bestsellers, new releases, and even now they are offering podcasts, which is super exciting. I love audiobooks for so many reasons, of course. I love that you can multitask with them, whether I'm doing a puzzle, going on my daily walks, even cleaning the kitchen. I will be listening to an audiobook, and it helps me reach my goals faster. The book I'm currently listening to, which is amazing so far and highly recommend, is The Breach by Nick Cutter, which you guys can see his books over here. I obviously love me some Nick Cutter. But The Breach is an Audible original and exclusive, so you can only find it on Audible. And it's your typical Nick Cutter style, beautiful writing, of course, and body horror. Audible has also recently launched Audible Plus, which is included in the membership and gives you access to thousands of audiobooks, originals, podcasts, even guided meditations to help you sleep. So each month members get one free audiobook in addition to the whole catalog of Audible Plus. Audible also just recently released a new original saga created just for Audible called Impact Winter. It's from the executive producer of The Walking Dead and the writer of Pacific Rim. What I think is really unique about Impact Winter is how it's presented in 3D audio. So it's recommended that you pop in your headphones and listen in a dark room. And the story sounds so cool, right up my alley. It follows two sisters, Darcy, who is a battle-tested vampire hunter, and Hope, who is just desperate for things to be normal again. And it's set in the near future where a comet hits Earth and blocks out all sunlight, which causes these creatures to emerge into the darkness, possibly vampires. So visit audible.com/impactwinter to start your free 30-day trial with Audible. I also have so many credits on Audible, so if you want to give me any recommendations for audiobooks that you are loving on there, or podcasts or anything, please let me know. Okay, let's get into all of the books that I've read so far this year. Getting started, we have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. So this is a science fiction thriller novel where a man wakes up in a different reality, where his wife, he never married his wife, his son was never born. He's in an alternate Chicago where 15 years prior made a different decision instead of the path that he was used to, being a family man and a physics professor, and instead pursued his career. So he wakes up in this new reality that is very unfamiliar to him. This book is of course inspired by the idea of quantum mechanics and how every decision creates a new reality and kind of like a multiverse and parallel universes, and I think that's such a cool setting for a thriller novel. This is a very much thriller novel. There's a couple horror elements in there, but it's really not that horrific, but it is very fast paced once it gets going. It took me about 100 pages for me to really get into this. I was a little bit bored in the beginning because I had no idea where it was gonna go. Once I realized what was happening actually, and when it really picked up, I could not put it down. This is probably the most entertaining book that I read this year so far. I still think about the things and the visuals in this book. I just love the idea of a million possible different realities and entering each one and seeing how different the world would be based on minuscule choices, you know? I did receive a DM when I posted this on Instagram. I do post all of my current reads over on my Instagram. There's a whole story highlight over there if you're interested, but someone did reach out saying that I probably wouldn't like this book that much because the writing is very rudimentary, and I will say that I give this 4 out of 5 stars, and that is because I found the writing to be a little bit lackluster. I feel like it could have been stronger. It was a little bit basic, but the story was absolutely incredible. So it definitely deserves 4 stars. I think that's why it took me a little bit of time to get into the book, because I couldn't really place the visuals. It just felt very descriptive and not, I don't know how to describe the writing. But the story was easy to follow given that it's a science fiction. It's not typically a subgenre that I read. So I was a little bit worried. I did read another science fiction, which I'm so excited to talk about, but the science fiction wasn't too hard to understand or anything like that if you're also new to the genre. There is a little bit of a love story in this, and I saw that on the cover when I picked it up, and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna love that, because, you know, I don't love love stories or, you know, sex or anything romantic in my books, but it's really not that bad. Like, this is a very realistic love story. I don't know, I can't say realistic because none of this is realistic, but I can't explain it. It didn't bother me at all. It wasn't too like romantic or anything. It really focuses on the different realities and the technology and the sci-fi aspects. So I highly recommend this book if you have not read it or if it's on your TBR list. This will be such an exciting read for you that it'll be so hard to put down if you're interested in that kind of genre. But do give it like 100 pages, because then it really takes off and it's really good. I think the beginning is fine. It's not a super slow beginning, but it was hard to like adjust to the writing being a little bit boring. I think that's what it is. The story isn't boring in the beginning. It's the writing that's a little bit dull. All right, next up we have Goblin by Josh Malerman, who did in fact write Bird Box. This is the first and only book that I've read from Josh Malerman. So this book is set around the small town of Goblin, and it's actually 6 novellas that tell the different stories taking place within Goblin. And there's something really interesting about the town of Goblin. There's a lot of secrets and history there, which you kind of uncover throughout each novella. I think this book is good. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. I would recommend it for the right people. I definitely enjoyed some novellas more than the others. I think the concept is really cool and something that I would personally do because I love writing short fiction. So I really liked that it was in 6 different novellas. I love that kind of storytelling, especially because they're all related. You know they all take place in the same town, and there's cross references to each story within the others, and it's a really cool telling. This is kind of the invert of Blake Crouch in that I think the writing is superb in this. It's very, very good writing. I really do want to check out his other books, but I feel like the stories could have been pushed a little bit farther. I feel like there are novellas where nothing actually happens and it's kind of building up to something really extreme, and then he doesn't really end them well. Like, the endings of all these stories are not great. Even the ones that I enjoyed, the endings were a little lackluster. My favorite story by far, and the only one that I really found to be horror and like horrific, is the first novella in this. It's called In Slices, where a man is proving his love for his girlfriend, and you can kind of guess what's going on there. That I feel like was the best executed story. Still didn't end great. I feel like he ends in a punchline almost instead of like a wrapped up story, if that makes sense. And after that one, the stories kind of fell off for me. There were some interesting ones, but they didn't excite me like the first one. The first one I was reading, I was like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? And then the other ones just kind of like dragged on a little bit too long, only for nothing really to happen in the end. I think it's entertaining. I would probably only reread the first 2 stories out of this book if I were to revisit it. It's fine. It's decent. It's a solid, collection of stories. I don't hate this. I'm not really obsessed with it. I think 3 stars is pretty appropriate. I did mark anytime you see yellow or whatever this is, chartreuse markings in my books, that will be animal harm. So there is some animal harm in this that's kind of graphic, so that's why I wanted to tag it, just so you guys are aware. If you want to know the specific pages, if you're interested in this, I can let you know. Anyway, that's Goblin. Love the cover. I think the cover's the best part about it, and I don't think I'll ever get rid of this book, even though I'm not obsessed with it, because it is absolutely beautiful. Like, I love the stunning cover. Also, my name on Twitter is Goblin Girl, so I feel a little bit biased, like I have to keep that. Next up, we have Survivor by Chuck Palahniuk. This is my first PALAHNIUK book that I've read. I have a couple other books from him that I am planning on reading, but he's a wild one. You know, he obviously wrote Fight Club. He's most known for Fight Club. But Ryan was the one, my partner was really pushing me to read this one. This is the exact copy he read, like in high school, I think, loaned to him from a friend. So this is, you know, seen some people. So this is a satirical book that follows Tender Branson, who is a survivor of a death cult. He is the last known survivor of the Creedish cult. And he hijacks a plane and intends on crashing it, but first he has to tell his story. So that's kind of what this book is. Not kind of, that's what the book is, telling his story before he crashes the plane. It's bizarre. It's an experience. The pages are numbered backwards, so you start at the very last number to forward. Not sure why that happens. It's like counting down maybe his life a little bit, because we are like kind of retracing his life. I'm not 100% sure if Chuck Palahniuk is for me. I get the appeal. It's a very, very unique reading experience. I had no idea what to expect, and it definitely surprised me. Like, it's like nothing I've ever read before, which was entertaining. It did make me want to continue reading because I wanted to see what was going to happen. Absolute blindsides in this. I did not expect anything that happens in this book. Not one thing did I think what was going to happen. It's a little graphic and gratuitous at times with the sexuality. That, again, not my favorite thing. I'm not a huge fan of the female character in this. It's just kind of confusing. It's written very coldly, which I think makes sense given it's from the perspective of our main character, Tender. Interesting name. So I think that kind of caught me off guard a little bit as well. Like, it's not my favorite kind of writing. As you know, I've talked about that before. If it's written kind of coldly, tend to not gravitate towards it or be, you know, drawn into it. It's good writing. I can't explain it, but it's just so bizarre. It's a bizarre experience. Like I said, you cannot anticipate anything in this book. It took so many turns. I had no idea what this book was even about going in. Like, not at all. I had nothing. I just knew it was called Survivor. That was all I had to go on. So I was completely taken off guard by so many things in this book. I had to connect the dots. It was just an interesting experience. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think for some people, this could be someone's favorite writer, and I'm sure he is a lot of people's favorite writer because it is just so unique, and he is very talented. I will give some of his other books a try because it is such a fun experience to read, I think, but I'm not sure if I would ever reread this one, Survivor. I don't know. Let me know if I should read Fight Club, even though I've seen the movie and kind of know everything that goes on in that. Let me know if it's still good. Next up, we have The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that Paul Tremblay is one of my favorite authors of all time. A Head Full of Ghosts is one of my favorite books ever, probably top 3 or 4 of all time. It's the scariest book I ever read, so if you want like a true horrific novel, check out Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. That's my favorite book to recommend because it is so effective and so good. So this follows couple Andrew and Eric and their daughter Wen, who are enjoying their vacation in a secluded cabin. 4 strangers show up and take the family hostage and tell them that they are needed in order to save the world. Firstly, the name is great. I absolutely love how Paul Tremblay names his books. I think it's some of the best titling. I know that's a really weird, like, compliment, but I think his titles of his books are so strong. This was a horrific story to me in that it made me cry. It made me feel a lot of emotions. My jaw dropped multiple times. I just never knew what was really going to happen. Like, I thought the story was pretty predictable up until a certain point, and then I was like, wait, maybe it's not what I think it is. Because I knew what the story was about going in, I did feel like it took a little bit too long to really get going in the beginning. Very little time passes in this book, and I feel like it almost fakes you out a little bit at the end of each chapter. Like, you know what they're gonna say to this couple, but they're just not getting there yet. So it was a little bit of a slower start to like really get the story going and make the point. But once it did, I feel like the story really got going. It definitely had some lulls in the story, which are necessary. Not every story can be super action-packed, but it was effective in building the anticipation of what's going to happen because you kind of know or think you know what to expect next. So you're anticipating certain things to happen. So there's a lot of tension building in this book. Like, I felt it was like painful sometimes in a good way, because that's what you want from like a horror novel, because you're also feeling the same kind of anticipation that the couple is feeling. I am glad where the story goes. I don't want to get into spoilers. I don't really do spoilers for books. Let me know if you want me to change that. Absolutely tragic. I love the vagueness of this. Like, this story is so cool how it wraps up, and I'm really happy that that's where he took it. I definitely recommend it. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. It's a really fast read. It does not top Head Full of Ghosts, of course. I think that's still his strongest novel, but I did enjoy it more than Survivor Song, which is another book that I've read from Paul Tremblay. So definitely check out Cabin at the End of the World. Let's take a little break from horror for just a second. I have to talk about this on my channel because, as you know, I'm obsessed with space and space drama movies specifically. So I knew I couldn't hold out on you in talking about Project Hail Mary. So this is by Andy Weir, who also wrote the novel for The Martian, which The Martian movie is one of my favorite space movies, or favorite movies of all time. So this book follows Ryland Grace, who wakes up from a coma with severe amnesia, only to find out he's on a spaceship in the Tau Centauri solar system, which is 12 light years from Earth. So his mission, as he slowly starts to regain his memories, is to find a solution to the solar dimming event that is happening back on Earth that could be the extinction of all humanity, possibly all life on Earth. I do own The Martian, the book, so I will be reading that at some point because the writing is so fun. I absolutely love the way Andy Weir writes. It's so approachable, yet so entertaining. Like, it's just an easy type of book. This is just I don't know how to explain it. I want to say feel-good book because it's so lighthearted, but there's obviously intense moments. This also made me cry. I don't cry very often with books, but it seems that I just keep reading books that make me cry. I promise I don't cry that much when I read. I feel like I need all the sci-fi recommendations that are similar to this. I absolutely love sci-fi stories that are based in somewhat of a reality that is plausible to us. So I'm not really a huge fan of Star Trek, Star Wars, things like that don't feel realistic. I like the down-to-earth science that is easily explained in how these things work in our reality. So it's like a near future type science fiction. This book was near perfect to me. I gave it 5 stars. Like, this is a 5-star read. I will definitely revisit this. They are making a movie for this as well, which is just fascinating. I'm not sure how they're gonna do that, but it stars Ryan Gosling, I think, as Ryland Grace, which is a good choice. I kept picturing Matt Damon just because the character reminded me of the character in The Martian, so that's just me. So I read this because I wanted to take a little bit of a break from all the heavy, you know, horror books that I was reading at the time. Survivor is very heavy. Cabin at the End of the World is very heavy. So I was like, I'm gonna take a little break, read a little science fiction. I did not expect this to be so lighthearted and fun though. Like, I was just anticipating something like, you know, science fiction, like typical space drama, like more drama. But the comedy in this is really good. You know, there's humor in this that I think is really effective, and the science descriptions in this are still really approachable. I like how he describes everything. So many things go over my head, I'm not gonna lie. I did not understand all of the science in this, but it's all thoroughly explained, which is so cool because you can tell that Andy Weir did a lot of research for this book. You get enough of the general concepts to kind of follow the story, so it's nothing too intimidating. I was so not expecting where this book goes. I'm not gonna say anything about it because I think the reveal is such a pleasant surprise because I was not expecting it at all. Once it introduces that story, I just could not put this down. Like, I was just so enthralled by this story, and it was so exciting to read, and nothing heavy about it. It was just nice. It was a nice read. A lot of things feel rushed over in this book. However, it's still a 5-star for me because I understand why he kind of had to do that. There's so much that he'd have to explain. So there's, you know, different time jumps here and there that aren't really thoroughly explained. The ending feels very strange. I was not expecting that ending at all. And that isn't really explained very well. You just kind of have to have suspension of disbelief for a lot of things. Anyway, obviously recommend. This book is amazing, incredible experience reading this. I wish I could reread this for the first time again because the experience of this was just so fun. I absolutely love this book and I cannot wait to read The Martian. I'm gonna space it out a little bit, but I can't wait to read The Martian. Obviously, I already know what happens in The Martian because I love the movie, but it'll be interesting to see how it's different. Okay, let's talk a little negativity, shall we? Well, this next book is a very complicated, I have complicated feelings about this next book. A little bit of a rant incoming. The last 2 books will be a little bit negative. So we talked about all the good ones. Okay, my feelings are just complicated. Anyway, Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. This is set around Halloween for the most part, kind of. In the beginning it is. So I was just kind of craving a Halloween story. This probably would be a really great read for Halloween, like in the actual Halloween season. But I'm just missing Halloween, what can I say? The other day I was saying this out loud, and then my partner and I went out and I saw a pumpkin in the middle of a grass field right next to where we live. I feel like the universe is just like, oh, you miss Halloween, here's a pumpkin. Cheer you up a little bit. Okay, so Kill Creek follows 4 modern horror authors who visit the Finch house, which is supposedly very, very haunted. So they're doing an interview there for WEIR, which is like an online pop culture type website, kind of for a publicity stunt where they all stay in this really haunted house and they stay the night there. Of course, something is waiting in the darkness to greet its new guests. Typical kind of haunted house story. You kind of know what to expect when you read this book, like you know the kind of things you're going to be getting, typical supernatural haunted house. Now, as far as haunted house stories go, this one's actually really, really good. I really enjoy the writing of this. I think Scott Thomas is a great writer. He's very talented. I think the visuals of this one resonated with me so much, and this is up there as far as horror goes with A Head Full of Ghosts. I think these 2, Head Full of Ghosts and Kill Creek, are the 2 scariest books that I've ever read, so if you want more horror, here you go. But just wait, because you might be saying, well, what's the problem? It sounds great. Before you read this, hear me out for just a second. I don't know if I can recommend this because some people are going to be very upset, me included, with some of the writing choices in this. Scott Thomas has 2 major issues: how he writes women and how he writes fat people. I was warned before going into this, there was a ton of fat phobia, and I'm just generally not a fan of how he writes women. Don't like that at all. When someone's breasts are mentioned twice on 1 page, that's not necessary, you know? I think he just makes the female lead in this so unlikable. The way she's written is just so... I get why she's written that way. Like, I get her character and what he was going for, but she's just unlikable. But he makes sure to remind you how good the lead looks at the ripe old age of 38, which he calls middle-aged. But also he lets you know what her breasts are doing most of the time, you know, just in case you forgot that she had boobs. He likes to remind you of that. There's a horror scene that's completely ruined, in my opinion, by the mention of boobs. Don't need that when we're talking about dead people and stuff. Don't need to know what breasts are doing. Really graphic descriptions of some sex things that don't actually happen in reality. They're set in fiction, but really, really graphic. Would prefer not to read those things. I did not know those were in there. It's not that frequent though. Like the sex in this, very, very minimal. Like the descriptions of the fictional stuff going on, very minimal. So it wasn't too much or anything. And then we get to the fat phobia, which is probably the worst part of this book. And I don't understand why he does this. I can't wrap my head around it. Who reads this? Like, he has a lot of people working on it. I'm not sure who would read this and not acknowledge it a little bit. Also, there's 2 typos in this book. I found 2 typos. The way he writes about one of the horror authors in this being overweight is kind of disgusting. Again, you mention his weight twice on 1 page. You're done. It just got to be really ridiculous because anytime this man was in a scene, anytime he is described in any set, first of all, why do we care what any of them look like any more than 1 description? We won't forget, okay? You don't have to remind us that her hair is black and her boobs are there. You know, like, we don't need to know every single time that the author is overweight. We don't need to have physical descriptions. I feel like he's very obsessed with making sure you get the visuals instead of doing it in a more creative way. It's just anytime this man was involved in a scene, he had to remind us how massive he was. And he used that word massive. The way he would describe this man is just gross. Like, I think his weakness is really how he describes characters and what he focuses on in his characters versus other things he could focus on, because he's a very talented writer. I absolutely loved the visuals in this, and you know, his writing in general is so good. I think I wanted more character development of who they were versus what they looked like. I feel like he wasted so much time constantly reminding us what people looked like. I think the details of the writers in this book are kind of lost on their physical appearance versus who they actually are, and you learn who they are through dialogue and things. It's not like it's horribly written characters. Like, I get it. I understand who these people are. And I'm sorry, I just need one brief description, hopefully cleverly put into the book that isn't so obvious. And then I'm good. I can fill in the rest of the details for myself. I'm just not sure what this author's size had anything to do with anything, you know what I mean? And just calling him massive constantly and like how big he was, it was like that was part of the horror for him, especially where the book goes, because then it gets real bad. There's a really inappropriate scene too. This reminds me of Stephen King. I feel like not enough people talk about the fact that Stephen King also writes pretty inappropriately when it comes to women and children. But there's a scene in this that reminds me of Stephen King. Maybe it's his idol. Kind of feels that way, where this man is looking at his daughter from his perspective, and we're getting some inappropriate descriptions here. She's a teenager. Okay, we don't need to hear about her budding body and how the dress drapes on it. You know what I mean? It's just not great. Kind of gross. Those really took me out of it and made me very turned off by the whole thing, which is really disappointing because this could have been so great and the horror is great. Like, I love the horror in this. Why you gotta write it like that? It really bums me out. I give it 3 out of 5. You know, I'm not gonna, you know, rate it super low just because of those things, because it's not the whole book, but it did ruin a lot of it for me. This would have been 4 for me if it hadn't had those things. So read it if it sounds good to you. Just be warned that those things are there. It's not for everyone. So those are all the horror books that I read so far this year. Let me know if you have any recommendations. I did post some of my TBR earlier. I have some of it on my Instagram stories as well, like my highlights. So you can check out what my collection's looking like right now. We will get to my next book in a second. Like, I want you to vote on what the next book is that I'm gonna read. But first we need to talk about the DNF, the did not finish, for very good reason. Now, this book is so famous on Book Talk. It's famous everywhere, actually. It's highly, highly recommended. I think this author is generally loved, but it's not for me. And I just want to say that if you enjoy this book, more power to you. Love what you love. Don't be, I like books too that no one else likes. It's fine. I'm not saying you have to hate this book, but I hated this book for the most part. I didn't finish it, obviously. I know what happens though. I kind of saw some spoilers on Book Talk and I was like, whatever, I'll just watch some spoilers. So I know what happens. Not really my thing, okay? Yeah. Verity by Colleen Hoover. I was so nervous to pick this up because I was like, everyone's been warning me, like all of you warned me when I put this in my last video about books, like, oh, you're not gonna like that. And you were not wrong. And then I posted it on my story that I was starting it and people were like, oh, you're not gonna like that. I should have just listened to you. You guys know my taste so well by now. You can tell me which books I'm gonna love and which ones I'm gonna hate, and I could probably trust you, like, no problem. And y'all were right. I don't like this book at all. I think part of the problem, this is Colleen Hoover's only book in this genre. I think she normally writes romance, clearly. I just don't read smut. I don't read smut. I'm sorry. If you love it, love it. A lot of people do. Just, I'm probably in the minority if not. I hate reading sex scenes. I hate it. I hate it more than anything in books. It's my least favorite thing. I know that's an unpopular opinion, probably. It just turns me off from a book completely, ironically. Anyway, this is about a woman who takes a writing job with this man and his wife Verity, who is in a coma, I guess, from an accident, and she has to kind of sort through all of her documents to kind of finish her book series for her as kind of a ghostwriter. And of course, when she arrives and she starts sorting through all the notes, she realizes there's a lot more going on in the situation, and there's a love story, obviously, a little love triangle, if you will. I read through 83 pages. That's how far I made it. 83, I could have stopped way earlier. I knew as soon as I started reading it, I was like, oh no. It's not gonna happen. I read through the first sex scene. I made it through, guys. I did it for you so I could, you know, give it a fair shot. Some of you said to read like 150 pages, and I'm like, I am not reading half of the book. When I know 80 pages in, I'm not a fan. Like, I'm not gonna read twice that amount, okay? I think life is too short to read books that you know aren't for you. I don't know why I bought this anyway. I don't know why. I think I was brainwashed by book talk and just everyone talking about this so much, and then I heard about the sex scenes and I was like, oh god, why? I'm sure it's fine for a lot of people. It's not for me, and that's okay. You know, not everything's gonna be for everyone. Colleen Hoover, not a fan of her writing. I don't like it. I think she tries very hard, and not in a good way. There's some lines that stood out to me like, that's a little try hard to me. You know, some things she over describes that don't need to be. I have an example. I wish I could find it. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know why, but this line in particular stood out to me as kind of like beginner writing. I don't know. I just want to give an example of what I'm talking about. So she just witnessed this man die. I only have to look down at my once white shirt at the blood now splattered across it to know that a hearse would serve him better than an ambulance. I don't know why I don't like that line. Like, a hearse would serve him better than an ambulance. It just feels like, all right. I can't put it into words, but it's just not my thing. I don't know. I just don't think the writing is that great. There's so many things about that book. It's just not for me. Not for me. So don't ever recommend Colleen Hoover to me ever again. A lot of you did recommend that to me. I'm looking at you. But thank you to those of you who know my taste and told me that I would not like it. I should have listened to you from the beginning. So I'm not sure what to do with this book now. I guess I'll just sell it to a used bookstore. So for my next book, I realized that I was reading a lot of male authors. I really need to get in with some like other authors. So if you have any recommendations of women or POC or, you know, queer authors or anything like that, please let me know, because clearly there's a lot of men going on here. So for my next book, I have Gillian Flynn novels on my shelf, on my TBR, that I have never read. I have Gone Girl, of course, and I have Dark Places. So I want to know, between the two, which one would you guys recommend the most? And leave it in a comment down below. The one that gets the most thumbs up is going to be my next read. So make sure you leave a comment to vote for which one you think I should read next. There you have all of the books that I wanted to talk about so far this year. Let me know if you enjoy the quarterly thing. I'll do it again in another 3 months or so, or if you want me to do monthly recaps. I just don't think they'd be that interesting. But what kind of book content do you want? I really don't know what to do for book content or how to talk about books more. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.